Hi, everybody. Just want to thank everybody who's attempted to send in some questions. We're always in need of questions. It's very, very helpful. And might need also a few more for the seminar. But remember, the questions that you're asking are related to everybody and anybody that might be watching and might watch eventually. This one is from Jennifer Butler, and it says, what do you do when the life map asking for help and meditation doesn't reduce the noise in your head? Is it possible to make it stop? I have been having a harder time tolerating the noise, chatter, and imagery going through my head. Until recently, it was easy to notice, accept, and allow in meditation and throughout my day. But lately, I feel a growing need to turn it off, but I don't see how or know if it's even possible. I also sometimes feel sensitive to external sounds and feel the need to wear earplugs to reduce my reactions and the feelings of being overloaded. How does one manage intense physical energy during meditation? I'm going to try the first part of this first. Our human system is set up to reassert and engage in dialogues that we have engaged with over and over again in our lives. And we have done that to allow ourselves to be comforted by what we tend to believe is normal. And the sensitivity that occurs there is quite interesting because we have the ability to kind of shut things off and not pay too much attention to what's going on. And we tend to do that kind of automatically. Shutting things off in an external way is quite different than shutting something off in an internal way. It's almost like a very interesting way of allowing ourselves to choose things out of our head that virtually align with how we think we need to be. It's very, very interesting, very fascinating. Unfortunately, what happens is we validate the images that we believe are let's say, more valuable than any other images because they're ours. And anything that, let's say, reasserts these images makes us feel more comfortable. There is a dilemma in growing. That often happens from the root, gonad, and solar plexus, of course. And we set something up internally and intone those methods over and over and over again to make us feel secure. So once again, here we go. When we start growing, what begins to occur is that there's a small gap that begins between allowing ourselves to feel comfortable with anything and everything that's going through our mind and actually some form, very soft but there, within us that is saying or alluding to saying, do you really believe this? Want this? Is this viable for you? It can sometimes be very annoying, but do your best to to try and insert a kind of softening down in the annoyance, because the annoyance itself is attempting to get you back into a state where you were before. This is normal. It's not a bad thing. It's just what happens. So what is occurring is that energy in the front of you, this is for everybody, not only for Jennifer, comes up the front, moves slightly through the chest area from the solar plexus. It's emotional because you have these reactions. You'll notice it. But it opens the throat center in a fashion that is different than the personality's relationship between the gonad center and the throat center and the root center and its meanderings upward, because all meanderings upward from the lower centers are still kind of wrapping themselves around a way of engaging with life that we call personality. So the throat center opens this way, stop there, which has been opening for who knows how many lifetimes, but certainly in this lifetime. And then it stretches a little bit more and then finds that the emotions in the mind are watching something that it's not necessarily agreeing with. Now, it's not about finding something bad or good, although the personality itself, when it finds something that it's not agreeing with, it calls it bad, or calls it this, or calls it that. It has a multiplicity of names that it might call something, because it's practiced these things. There's no negation in this. It's just what we do. But when that throat center starts opening a little bit more, remember, it'll bring attention or energy up to the brow center. Try to open it a little bit more. Now you're watching a little bit more, or hearing, because it relates to the ears as well. You're hearing things with a different tone. It's not as comfortable because the throat center has reached out a little bit past what it normally is open in the personality, with the personality, and stretches a bit so that you hear things a little bit more concordant, not sure that's the right word, but not exactly the way it feels comfortable for you. And the personality itself is trained in assessment making and value, looking for value according to it. So it does that automatically. So if you can notice that something has changed there, what you might be able to do is talk to yourself and just say something as silly as, okay, now, something may have changed here. That might have been, you may not believe this, but that might have been comforting to me before. And I would pick something and value it somehow so that my personality would be inclusive with it, those kind of discordant tones that come up. They haven't changed. They were always there. So really, what you've done is become aware slightly differently than you could be aware previously, because those particular frequencies or energy, let's say, or intensities that are part of your perception making process has shifted just a little bit. They, in that shift, send energy back down to your emotions, your root, your gonad center, which, by the way, are the stabilizing structures related to your personality as it was previously. No negation there. So what you're basically doing is noticing something slightly different and then using normal reactive responses that may have been in your purview, the way a natural thing for you, and you're using them literally against the change in a kind of a funny way. Nothing negative about that. This will happen to many people when they're growing, actually growing. And a little trick is just saying simply, for me, that would be, okay, Ron, easy does it. Easy. You may have shifted in that you're not seeing those tones exactly the way you saw them before. They were more self-validating before. Now they're less self-validating. Self-validating, the self, the imaginary self that we make up in relationship to how we see ourselves. I called it imaginary. You could call it the great system, a great way you've seen yourself. And when I'm saying you, I'm not talking about Jen. I'm talking about everybody, including myself, because growing is quite interesting when it relates to tones. And this is including I'll try and include a little bit of Jeannie's question in this, just so, Jeannie, you realize I'm actually attempting to answer some of that you mentioned when you were saying are particular personal tones intrinsic to our energy system within this carnation or birth, or do we develop particular tones as we used universal energy to survive and grow? Does using energy tools like map balancing, etc., modify tones? Well, look, there's 8 billion plus people on this planet. Now think of this just a little bit. Try to soften down any kind of a reaction if you can. Each and every one of us relays a tone to our species. That's exactly how it works, from my perspective, of course. You, in your worlds, cultivate a permissive aspect of your personality unto itself. You allow you to be the way you are. That's permissive. Relative to considering that your way of doing life is a very valuable way, a comforting way, the way things should be. There's no negation in this. This is what everyone is up against. As you begin to grow, you begin to realize that those inner tones that you protect, in a kind of a sense, you attempt to maintain through various ways of engaging with others and with yourself. This is difficult to make sense of. However, if 8 billion people are doing the same thing, 8 billion people are contributing individually to a tone that relates to what we call humanity. But each individual is significantly engaged with tones, also relative to themselves. I call that an act of love for yourself. If you can understand the relevance of that, an unknown maintenance on our part to keep a tonal reference unknown to us, we do it anyway, but of a certain kind, without even knowing we're doing it, and that contributes to the whole of the species. That in a kind of a way, your loving of yourself contributes to the species and affects other people to be more like you. Now let's stretch this out a little bit, so we don't take on the whole difficulties and problems of the world. But let's think about this. There are, let's say, 1 million people, not a very big number when you talk about 8 billion, who might act in a similar way to something that may go on in their lives, or they may react in a certain way to everything. And they say, this is the way things should be, and that's the way things should be, and that's the way they shouldn't be, and that's the way they shouldn't be. We have setups that idealistically trying to keep a balance in that kind of thing the best we can. Unfortunately, it doesn't always work. Sometimes it does. But every individual in that 1 million people as a group is contributing in a certain way in relationship to a continuum of contributions along a single relevant issue. What do you mean by that? Well, you might get angry if somebody bothers a dog in an inappropriate way. You need to think about that. Some people actually think of a dog as just an animal and has no brain, has no feeling, I don't agree with that. But nonetheless, I'm one of those maybe 1 million people that don't agree with that. But we start hating other people rather than when we have a dog, we treat it with great respect and help it to learn the rules of you. So it isn't biting people, it isn't doing all kinds of things that maybe is antisocial in the human world. Although we do that with humans sometimes. You see, there is an example. So if that is said by 1 million people, we might think all of our 1 million people, we're contributing to that core of humanity in a vibration that will help humanity. But wait, that's not helpful. That may stimulate others who hate deeper in different places where we would just shudder and find it just irresponsible to hate that way or to engage that way. Yet we have just sent them more hating. This is a little bit complicated, would you say? Well, I'm assuming 1 or 2 of you would say, yeah, it seems really complicated. It would be complicated because each and every one of us, 8 billion people, have contributed to being quite frustrated or angry or this or that at some time with respect to something. We affect ourselves with that. Tone, vibration, whatever it may sound like. But also that's, since we are a human being, it is us in the core of that human structure, and we are affecting it that way. So now you start to grow. And now it's confusing because you're more sensitive than you were before. Honest growing is not only related to belief systems. Hopefully, we're learning a little bit about that. But belief systems are important to hold us in a place where we can find ourselves comfortable, at least, with at least an attempt to make some sense of things. The diversity of belief systems is unbelievable. Each one who has whatever they think is valuable in their heads or in their emotions, they call that significant. And the only way things should be in a diverse world of 8 billion people. Relatively speaking, it makes no sense to say something like that. But it also makes no sense not to have opinions about other things as well, because that you have every single day of your life, and even in spiritual development. It's real. It's because we are attempting to grow, attempting to shift those tones internally, attempting maybe, if we have a heart, since we are a part of that 8 billion people, we try sometimes to shift the tone within ourselves where we don't want to. Neither should we say. Lots of things. Because we're growing, we're young. And we come up with things that we're not very considerate of other people. And we do that every single day of our lives. Why? Because we're human beings and we are young. We do these things. So as you shift something inside yourself, don't tell anybody else. Slowly back away from the epitome of a perfect individual's thinking process. I'm talking about you, me, everybody else. In one particular second, where you can only validate that thing. And if you do that, you're adjusting something within yourself. Don't be afraid to reconsider. This is not an easy thing to do. However, each one to his own taste. Now, when you're dealing with things like this, when we go back to Jennifer's and Jean's question, sounds a little bit more complicated. So if you take it on with great respect to you, great attempt to really understand, try to figure out what it is that's there in you, that you do you so well and validate it so sharply for a purpose that relates directly to maintaining a structure that is constructed from the time you're age 0 through many experiences, many discontents, and many joys as well. I think the great difficulty in all of this is, as we grow, we treat our growing as if the personality is the greater part of an engagement with how one should be. And I think that that's got us all pretty tied up. But Ron, how would you do it any other way? Oh boy. It's a dilemma. We are growing through ourselves individually, honestly. And we really don't like other people telling us what to do. That's a secret, by the way. Don't tell anybody else. Yet, we tell ourselves what to do all the time. It's like an old picture telling you how to engage the next day when you're a day older than you were yesterday. And it's framed. It's got boundaries everywhere. Very thin. Hard to look deeper because we're enamored, we're in love with how we believe we think we should be right there. Spiritual growth is deeper from my perspective. I apologize to anybody that relates only to a belief system. Here's what I believe. I believe every belief system has something to offer. You may not agree with me. Good. If you don't, figure out why. Try to understand you. You're the person you're growing through. The belief system is an add-on. We have many. Keep them. Don't you throw them away until you see that others may have something similar in there. Then don't throw them away. Add to them. As a human being, we have this great need to have something within a value that we believe has to be close to an ideal. To be honest, it isn't. But that's me being honest with me. There are times when it seems everything that anybody says seems off. And that includes belief systems. See that. Don't negate the belief system. Don't negate the person. Try to figure out what's going on. As opposed to just going for the surface thing. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is right, this is right, this is... We all do this one. So that's a tone. That is a tone. That's the tone we send out. The difficulty with that tone is it's transmitted to other people in a devaluating way. Think about it. You're evaluating yourself beyond their capacity to grow. Because if you do that, then you have 2 or 3 other people who agree with you. And the example I use, only 1 million people agreed. It's a dilemma. Growing from the inside relates to experience. I talk about energy all the time, and it's true, and I really believe that deeply, that you and your perception of that energy within is a relationship with a high state, a very high state. We're not used to thinking about things like that. tones are the same thing. You take in a tone. If a person is talking, like I'm talking now, you take in a tone. And if that tone has a discordant factor related to you and how you want things to be heard, then your brain will take on that information and your emotion will spit out a response. That's the response you engage with others with. Yeah, but you don't talk like that all the time. You don't react. I know, but it's there. And that's what's transmitting. And that affects the core of humanity. To help humanity to grow by helping yourself is quite a task. But considering the possibility of helping yourself is quite a task as well. Because we're less interested as a species in shifting our perspectives because we're invested in them. That's an act of love for your own self-interest. That is love. And annoying as that sounds to any of us when we catch ourselves doing it, but beginning to understand that there is a deeper relationship that we can attempt to acquire through meditation and through prayer, yes, and through an engagement with allowing ourselves to reconsider things and reconsider us from time to time. Little by little. You can't do this in 24 hours. As some leave. Ronnie, would you get me a glass of water, please? We were talking about the throat center. Sorry. This leads to a different level of engagement and preparation for the soul. And that is a thing that has been talked about for a long time, centuries, way back. Egyptian times, Babylonian times, all kinds of times. In the Far East, Middle East, in the West. And that's a thing called initiation. Now, what the heck is that and what does it mean? Initiation, from one perspective, is an act of engagement with a higher state that stretches you. And you are, I am, a personality, some might call. And personality is the outcropping of energy moving through into this system. I usually call that chakras or sephira, valves, all kinds of things. And if you don't believe in this, my point is experience it. Learn that perceiving energy is a help in that. Because that's all these systems that and more that we've been talking about over the years help in that particular way of engaging. You begin to perceive it, but you will use that energy to flood your personality with the values you think need to be there for you to have a good personality. the right one, versus some other way of thinking. It happens every day. So, an increase in flow coming into the personality stretches the personality and exposes to the personality itself more and more. Trick in this, and it's tricky, you may not even notice it. You might just exaggerate more what you believe has to be expressed more often because it's more right. This is normal. This is getting away from Jean and Jennifer's question slightly. So there's a dilemma. Can we prepare personally a little bit for a much more, let's say, stronger inflow from a higher state that would stretch our personalities even more so that we can, and it may take a while, we can help ourselves to understand us better and not devalue us, but be willing to just paint a picture slightly different than the one we've already painted that we call personality. Are we capable of this? Or what must we go through long periods of time through personalized experience to find out that there are things maybe gaping holes in what we already believe? And I think there are gaping holes in what everybody believes. Personally, that's what I think. These tremendous levels of flow of energy coming in. Let me give you an example of what might occur. I can only give you one example of it, and that would be my own, I guess, at least to some degree. And that's only one. There are many of these things where you may not be able to function the way you could before. Your interests are totally different. It doesn't mean that if you have different interests that no longer you've been initiated into something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about devastatingly tremendous levels of energy where you can barely function. Can there be preparation for this? One of the preparations that can occur is that you begin to allow yourself just to see you and how you function. All right. How? Well, you get angry every now and then. Okay, so I get angry every now and then. Just say that to yourself. And sometimes I feel so kind and gentle inside that I can't stop. My tears roll down my eyes. Okay, that's what happens in you. Don't shirk it. Doesn't give you extra special things. You haven't got a medal there. You do have an experience, and it's part of you. Sometimes you're so bright. Other times, it feels like you're dumb as a stone. Those are two things that can happen to you. Sometimes you just love a person to pieces. Later, God, you can't stand them walking around you. It's okay. Don't take it out on them. Don't take it out on you. Sometimes you perceive things in another that you feel are not very comforting to you, having them there and their engagement with you. Nobody's perfect. They have flaws in them the same as you have flaws in you. Do your best to engage with them so that you can learn that you have some similar stuff in you. I used to say the stronger reaction that you have, there's something in there that you haven't even noticed yet. Well, nobody likes to hear that one. So scratch that. Just wipe it away. Or keep it. You might notice them every now and then. Depends how long you live. Find a sense of humor. It helps. Try to find something other than yourself judging the whole of the world. The world is not the way you think it is. It's not the way almost everybody thinks it is. It's a very positive, beautiful place to be in. And mostly people are good people. There's some weird ideas, one could say, including myself, I guess. But nonetheless, they're people. And you are a people as well. That could be part of the preparation and the understanding that you might have after such an engagement with higher states, where love is coming in so much that you just can't stand it. You're not prepared to stand it. You're called upon to trust so deeply. And you can't do that. You're not prepared to do that yet. And also, it's so difficult to recognize that there is something other than what you have to engage with the world. It is going to remain there for a long time because you are also a participator in this living process. And this is a hard one to make some sense of. Higher states are part of it. This state is also a part of an engagement with life. We have much to learn, much beyond what I can talk about. And I'm talking about anybody and everybody out there and what they can talk about or would talk about. So we're trying not to be afraid of being okay with listening inside to a disagreement that can be cultivated by us about us, that is respectful and gentle and kind, compassionate, you could say, in rendering slow movement into a place where you can allow yourself to consider the possibility that that higher state could trust you and me to gain access to a perception that would not only be negative, but reach into a kind of hope and wisdom and a sensibility that allows ourselves to learn as well, not only to judge and manufacture a strong skin that holds away the touch of another's love, not necessarily related to the rules and regulations that we have on these planes about caring and loving. It's a deep level of understanding and perception that comes over you at a different level, but it includes the physical, emotional, mental, but much it doesn't bother them. It doesn't make them a part of it. So levels of higher state, touching, an opening of the throat center, a little more than previously recognized, naturally stimulates a reaction. I don't like this sound. I don't like that sound. I don't like this. Here's a trick. Sit back. Talk to yourself. Say something like your words, not mine. Easy does it. Let me just give me a hand with this because I'm in a reflex that is normal for me. And I need help to soften this down. But I trust my own reactions better than I trust anything else. But give me a hand with this. I need the help. Sooner or later, everyone in their relationship with inner growth begins to realize that there is something else. You can call it whatever you're trained to call it. It's not offended by it. Someone may say it's a nuclear flow of horrendously powerful forces. Sure. Say what you want. Not offended by it. It's relational. It's related to a relationship within. And it would do nothing but wish us and hope for us to be a significant part of a relationship, a deep relationship with others, not letting anybody else know that that was real. Because, in fact, it operates within us at our level of engagement, often without any perception of its existence at all. This stuff may sound weird to some, so I apologize for that. I don't apologize for saying it, but I do apologize for it sounding weird. Words are really interesting. I don't always have perfect words for what I would like to say, so just do the best you can with your words, and I'll try to do the best I can with mine. So in and around these questions are related to our experiences. Sometimes there can be real jolts in the body. Could be because a center comes on just differently than it ever was on before. And for it jolts the body. It could affect the nervous system just a little bit, or a nerve, or you might be sitting in one way and it affects a nerve in your body. The nervous system is a very poignant part of our physical presence. And not everything is known about it, but it does engage with those chakras, that's for sure. Also, at the same time, our relationship with what we're used to in our body. Sometimes there are things that occur in our body that we don't even notice in our bodies. And a little bit more awareness, we start noticing some of them. And we have a great need for answers. What is this? This is this. Oh, okay. In fact, I keep this same adage out front and center. If you think there's something wrong physically, do yourself a favor. Go to a doctor. I don't care whether you agree with them or not. Go. Get them to check the system out. If they say there's nothing we can find as yet, then consider much of it may be energetic, but it may not be. It may be a precursor to something physical that you're perceiving because your perceiving has become a little bit increased. I cannot tell you that. I can only tell you that sometimes that can happen, and you need to treat the body best way you can. I know there's all kinds of different belief systems about that. Check it out anyway, best you can. We live in the 21st century, and people are not perfect at anything they do. Be it, call it whatever you want. Doctors or lawyers or, I don't care. Politicians. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Nobody's perfect. So I wish you well, everybody, and we're going to meditate right now. And I hope some of you, if you have some other questions, please pop them into our email, and we'd be glad to look at them. I meant to do a couple more questions tonight, but this one is covering at least 2 or 3 of them. So I wish you well, everybody. Bye for now.
民族，老人中年轻啊最真爱，人间三个人诺大在上，他当千年马拉松完的，天边可能接着总来白，家在街角看着看着。面对着我面前决定的，让给亚西卡拉索完的，也那索完那别说了天，那所在里面去有去，愿这些年说给解锁的，有的上着我把头的说，一边过年左边到满头。夏天出点出生命，天多天啊，写着天啊天，彩色在心头为人热
And now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding. And I wish you all have a good evening. Take care. See you in the weekend.